In just 34 seconds, $47 million in classified document handling fees would be exposed. FBI Director Kash Patel didn't expect this question. He shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair, fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. Cameras zoomed in as sweat appeared on his forehead. The Senate Intelligence Committee chamber fell silent like a tomb. What did Representative Daniel Goldman uncover that made the most powerful law enforcement official in America stumble over his own words and contradict 3 previous testimonies? At exactly 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon that would define both men's careers, Goldman walked into the hearing room carrying a manila folder marked Classified Epstein investigation files. His expression was that of a prosecutor who had just found the smoking gun. Patel sat across the witness table like an FBI director who thought he controlled every narrative in Washington. He had no idea what was coming. The chamber buzzed with energy. Reporters adjusted their cameras. Senate staffers whispered urgently into phones. Everyone sensed something explosive was about to unfold, but nobody anticipated the complete destruction of a federal agency's credibility in under a minute. Goldman's opening move was surgical. Director Patel, you stated under oath last month that you had limited knowledge of the Jeffrey Epstein investigation files. Is that correct? Patel's jaw clenched slightly. That's accurate, Congressman. The FBI's involvement was minimal. As I testified. I see. Goldman opened his folder with deliberate precision. And you also testified that you don't recall any discussions about Trump's name appearing in investigative documents, correct? I believe that's what I said, yes? What happened next would trend on Twitter within minutes and force 3 major news networks to break into regular programming. Goldman pulled out a photograph, a crystal-clear image of Patel sitting in a Department of Justice conference room, pointing at documents spread across a table. The timestamp read, March 15. This photo was taken during a classified briefing you attended about Epstein investigation materials. Do you recognize this image, Director? Patel's face drained of color. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the microphone. I would need to review the context of that meeting. The context? Goldman's voice rose with prosecutorial precision. The context is that you spent 2 hours and 23 minutes reviewing documents that specifically mentioned Donald Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein. The meeting minutes show you said, and I quote, "We need to manage this narrative carefully before it reaches the media." The chamber erupted. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Republican senators huddled with their aides. Democratic member leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. But Goldman wasn't finished. Furthermore, Director Patel, phone records show you had 7 conversations with Trump's legal team in the 48 hours following this briefing. 7 conversations about what you just testified you don't recall discussing. Patel's breathing became visible. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he scrambled for an answer. Congressman, these were routine administrative calls about suppressing evidence of criminal activity. That's a serious accusation, Patel finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. Goldman struck again, this time with devastating precision. It's not an accusation, Director. It's a fact documented in FBI internal communications. Would you like me to read the email you sent to your deputy director on March 6th, the one where you wrote, "Keep this Epstein material buried until after the election cycle"? The moment those words left Goldman's mouth, Patel's entire demeanor collapsed. His shoulders sagged. His eyes darted toward the exit. The confident FBI director who had walked in that morning was disappearing before 47 million viewers watching on live television. I don't recall writing that specific email. Goldman smiled, not with joy, but with the satisfaction of a prosecutor who had just secured a conviction. You don't recall, just like you didn't recall the meeting, just like you didn't recall the phone calls. Just like you didn't recall reviewing documents with Trump's name on them. Twitter exploded within seconds. Patel'd under oath began trending. Fox News cut their regular programming. CNN anchors struggled to contain their excitement as they reported breaking news alerts. But the most devastating moment was yet to come. Goldman reached into his folder one final time and produced a single sheet of paper. Director Patel, this is your signature on a document dated March 18, 2024. It authorizes the permanent classification of 47 pages of Epstein investigation materials. Your signature, your authorization, your decision to hide evidence from Congress and the American people. Patel stared at the document for what felt like an eternity. The entire chamber held its breath. Cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the exact moment his career ended. I signed many documents that week, he whispered, barely audible through the microphone, including documents to obstruct justice. I invoke my Fifth Amendment, right against self-incrimination. The chamber exploded. Reporters rushed to file breaking news stories. Senate Democrats called for immediate resignation. Republican allies began distancing themselves. Within 47 minutes, 3 major news organizations reported that the Department of Justice had opened a criminal investigation into FBI leadership. The most powerful law enforcement official in America had just admitted guilt on live television, watched by 47 million Americans and broadcast to every corner of the globe. As Patel gathered his papers with trembling hands and left the witness table, Goldman delivered his final statement. Mr. Chairman, the FBI has been compromised from the very top. When the director of our premier law enforcement agency lies under oath to protect political allies, the entire justice system is at risk. Outside the Capitol building, protesters gathered within hours. Some demanded Patel's immediate arrest. Others called for congressional conventional proceedings. The FBI building in downtown Washington increased security as agents questioned whether they could trust their own leadership. By evening, Patel's resignation letter had been submitted, but the story was far from over. What Goldman had exposed was just the tip of an iceberg that would rock Washington for months to come. At 11:47 p.m. that same night, FBI whistleblower agent Sarah Martinez walked into the Washington Post newsroom carrying a briefcase filled with internal communications. Her hands shook as she spoke to investigative reporter Jake Pearson. What Goldman revealed today, it's nothing compared to what's been happening inside the Bureau for the past 2 years. Martinez had been documenting everything, every suspicious order, every buried investigation. Every time Patel's office had interfered with ongoing cases involving Trump associates. She had 1,147 pages of evidence that would make Goldman's hearing look like a warm-up act. Patel wasn't working alone, Martinez explained, her voice barely above a whisper. There's a whole network. Deputy Director Stevens, Assistant Director Crawford, even some field office supervisors. They've been systematically burying investigations, reclassifying evidence, and protecting political allies since January. The next morning's headlines would send shockwaves through every FBI field office in America. Internal FBI documents reveal systematic corruption at highest levels. But the most explosive revelation came 72 hours later, when Goldman received an encrypted message on his secure phone. The sender, the message contained a single photo, Patel sitting across from Trump at Mar-a-Lago on December 15, 2024, 3 weeks before his Senate confirmation hearing. Between them on the table, a folder labeled Epstein Files, Permanent Burial. Goldman stared at the image for a full minute, his prosecutor's mind racing through the implications. This wasn't just obstruction of justice. This was a criminal conspiracy planned at the highest levels of government, orchestrated before Patel had even officially taken office. Within hours, Goldman was on the phone with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Chuck, we need emergency hearing. This corruption goes deeper than we thought. Patel was following direct orders from Trump to suppress evidence. Meanwhile, at FBI headquarters, chaos reigned. Agents who had spent their careers believing in the Bureau's entry watched their world crumble on live television. Special Agent Michael Torres, a 15-year veteran, spoke for many when he told his partner, "I joined the FBI to serve justice, not to cover up crimes for politicians." How do we look families in the eye and tell them we're the good guys when our own director is a criminal? The demoralization spread quickly through the ranks. Field agents began questioning every directive from headquarters. Ongoing investigations slowed to a crawl as agents wondered which orders were legitimate and which were part of the cover-up. Several field office chiefs requested emergency transfers rather than continue serving under compromised leadership. But Patel's allies weren't going down without a fight. At exactly 3:22 a.m. on the fourth day after the hearing, someone broke into Goldman's congressional office. Nothing was stolen, but his files had been searched. A single message was left on his desk. "Some secrets are worth dying for." Goldman's security detail was immediately increased, but the congressman refused to back down. At a press conference that afternoon, he stood before a crowd of reporters and delivered a message that would define the rest of his career. Threatening a sitting member of Congress proves how desperate they've become. The truth doesn't disappear because corrupt officials don't want it revealed. The investigation expanded rapidly. Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Mark Warner announced a joint congressional investigation with subpoena power. The Department of Justice Inspector General opened a criminal referral process. Even international allies began questioning whether they could share intelligence with a compromised FBI. Then came the phone call that changed everything. At 7:15 p.m. on Friday, Goldman's secure line rang. The caller identified himself as Agent Thompson, FBI counterintelligence. His message was urgent. "Congressman, you need to know they're planning to destroy the evidence tomorrow night. A controlled fire at the Hoover Building, archives. They're going to claim it was an electrical malfunction." Goldman immediately contacted FBI Deputy Director Williams, one of the few remaining officials he trusted. Williams confirmed the worst fears. "Sir, I've been locked out of critical systems since Wednesday. My security clearance has been temporarily suspended for review. They're cleaning house, and they're doing it fast." The race against time became a nightmare. Goldman had less than 24 hours to obtain court orders, organize federal marshals, and secure evidence before it could be destroyed. He spent the entire night on conference calls with federal judges, Justice Department officials, and congressional leadership. At 6:33 a.m. Saturday morning, federal marshals surrounded FBI headquarters. They carried court orders signed by 3 different federal judges, commanding the preservation of all documents related to the Epstein investigation. The marshals arrived just as FBI custodial staff were wheeling archive boxes toward the building's incinerators. The final confrontation came when Goldman himself arrived at FBI headquarters, accompanied by a full congressional delegation and media crews. Standing in the lobby of the building that once symbolized American justice, he delivered an impromptu speech that would be remembered for generations. "The FBI belongs to the American people, not to corrupt officials who abuse their power to protect criminals. Today, we reclaim our premier law enforcement agency from those who would destroy it from within." By midnight that Saturday, 3 more FBI executives had been arrested on obstruction charges. By Sunday morning, Trump's legal team was in full crisis mode. By Monday, calls for presidential impeachment proceedings had begun on the House floor. The final piece of evidence that sealed Patel's fate came from an unexpected source: his own deputies' secretly recorded conversations. Deputy Director Stevens, facing federal charges himself, had been wearing a wire for the past month. The recordings revealed Patel's exact words from their final meeting: "If we go down, we're taking everyone with us. Trump, his family, half of Congress, nobody escapes this. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or a subpoena. It's truth, archived and revealed at the right moment. What happens when a law enforcement leader who built power on secrecy is undone by evidence? If justice can't survive transparency, was it ever real? The Goldman Patel hearing proved that in America, no one, not even the FBI director, is above the law. But it also revealed the terrifying fragility of our institutions when corruption reaches the very top. The bureau that had once pursued justice had become a tool for suppressing it. Months later, as congressional investigations continued and criminal trials began, Goldman reflected on those 34 seconds that changed everything. Sometimes democracy hangs by the thinnest of threads. Sometimes that thread is a single question, asked at exactly the right moment by someone brave enough to pull it.